I'm John Chowney with Campbellsville University with the Dialogue on Public Issues. Each year during the month of October here on the campus of Campbellsville University, our faculty, staff, coaches, and students engage in a process we call Dialogue on Race. And during this dialogue, during the month of October, there will be several small groups meeting, having facilitators from the local community and region who come in onto the campus, and they engage in intentional discussion on races, on issues of race and ethnicity and language, those areas that have divided us, unfortunately, through our history. And as a Christian institution, we feel very critically that this is something that in a Christian context is called for, that people in the church must be able to work together and be one in Christ, as well as non-Christians as well. Campbellsville University remains committed to that. This is our 20th year of having this dialogue. Each year in chapel, we host a special speaker. And I'm very pleased today to be interviewing our guest speaker for our Dialogue on Race keynote and chapel service, Dr. James Perkins. Dr. Perkins, welcome.
Thank you, sir. It's a delight to be with you.
Well, this is your second visit to Campbellsville?
Yes, my second year, I think, in the last maybe 45 years.
Right.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you indicated in your introduction, I serve as the pastor of the Greater Christ Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan, where I have been for the last 37 years. And I am a native of the neighboring state of West Virginia. As a matter of fact, I'm born and reared in a small town called Williamson, West Virginia, in the southwestern part of West Virginia that buttresses eastern Kentucky. So I grew up there, went to school in Texas and then Massachusetts, and I've been serving as a pastor in a church since that time.
You've been at Greater Christ how long?
37 years.
That's an amazing tenure. To what do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute it to having wonderful people who have been very supportive and encouraging of me and the ministry that I felt led to lead them in. And so these 37 years have gone quickly. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but I've been there for 37 years.
Now, as we have talked during your visit and your prior visit a few years back, you and our president grew up not far from each other. When we look at it from a global standpoint,
That's right.
He grew up in nearby Huntington, West Virginia.
That's correct.
And so you're just down a few counties and not too far away.
That's right. As a matter of fact, Williamson, my hometown, is about 93 miles south of Huntington. But I know Huntington, yes.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. What are some of the major ministries at Greater Christ Church? I know you've been engaged in doing more than, although a focal point, proclaiming the gospel, of course.
Yes.
But in addition to that obvious responsibility of a Baptist pastor, what are some other ministries you've been involved in?
Well, we felt compelled to get involved in our community and try to meet some of the needs of the community. So we have a housing ministry. We built what we call Providence Place, and that's 50 single family homes for low and middle income persons. Some years ago, we developed the Benjamin E. Maysmell Academy, which is a school for boys in grades K through 6. And then earlier, we bought an abandoned building so we could sort of change the complexion and the aesthetics of the community. And we turned that abandoned building into a Burger King franchise. And so it's ministries like that that have helped to make some difference in the community and the lives of individuals, in addition to our traditional ministries of evangelizing, missions, where we have a foreign missions objective, which is called FOCOS, Foundation of Orthopedic Surgery. We helped to build a hospital in Ghana, which does nothing but focus on orthopedic surgery. So it's ministries like that, and we have youth and young adult ministries with mentoring programs for girls and for boys and the like.
You have an academy under your umbrella?
Yes, okay. Benjamin E. Maysmell Academy.
Okay. Very
Yes.
good. Now, what age groups does that
Grades
program?
K through 6.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, why that particular age group?
Well, because we felt like we could have a greater impact on the lives of males. Our focus was helping young men to develop, to grow up, to live constructive, productive lives. And so we felt that the best way to go about it was to reach them as early as we could and to help to mold and shape them, to instill Christ-centered values in them at an early age so they would grow up with those values and in the direction that we were trying to lead them. There's an old expression that we kind of adopted that says it's better to build a boy than it is to try to fix a broken man. So we felt like if we could help the young men get a strong, sound, solid academic and Christian foundation, we would have a better chance of having impact in their lives.
Now, you obviously are following the Great Commission, and for some, the Great Commission is principally preaching and evangelizing. And I think you and I both would agree that's an important part of the Great Commission, obviously.
Absolutely.
Fundamental to it. But I also sense that a part of the Great Commission, as you view it, is ministering to the least of these. And why is it that some people see a line of demarcation between evangelism and social justice or social ministry, whatever term you want to apply to that aspect?
Well, I think that a lot of people just see the gospel as to live a personal, responsible Christian life. But I believe that God wants to transform not just individuals, but He also wants to transform communities and society, so that if you can create a healthy environment, then it will help to support and sustain a healthy individual life. It's not enough to change individual lives and then send them back into a toxic community. So the gospel, as I understand it, is not just about proclaiming, it's also about trying to make the word become flesh and to impact the community and the surroundings around us. Our philosophy of ministry at Greater Christ is a ministry of community redemption. Not just individual redemption, but community redemption, which simply means that saved people have a responsibility to turn around and save their surroundings. And we're simply trying to address the needs that we see around us in a contemporary, meaningful way.
Isn't there not in the Bible, both in the Old Testament and even and certainly in the New Testament, and then particularly if you focus on the Gospels, the four Gospels, a very important emphasis placed upon those very things?
Absolutely. Jesus, He preached, He taught, but He fed 5,000. He had a feeding, a food ministry. He raised the dead. That is to say, He brought back lost lives. So He healed lame people who didn't have the power to stand up on their own 2 feet. He empowered them to be able to stand up on their own 2 feet. One of the miracles that He performed was He healed a man's withered hand. That hand caused that man to not be able to live a productive life. He couldn't sustain himself. So Jesus healed his hand. So we have to take those ancient stories and we have to translate them in the language and contemporary context of our time. And that's what I see my responsibility is as a pastor.
And then there's the parable of the sheep and goats and His teaching about the least of these.
Absolutely. The parable of the sheep and the goats, he says to the goats, "Depart from me, your works were of iniquity, I know you not." And to the sheep, they said, "Well, when did we see?" He said, "Inasmuch as you did it unto one of the least of these, inasmuch as you gave a cup of cold water to somebody's, inasmuch as you clothed the naked, you did it to me." So that's how I see and understand my responsibility, again, to interpret and help people understand how to implement the gospel, not just to hear it, but to do it.
In the context of urban ministry, what are some of the major challenges that people in the community surrounding your church and the environment, if you will, the neighborhood environment of the particular community where you're located? Some of those challenges, and then again, you've already mentioned how you're addressing those challenges, but some commentary on that.
Well, you know, people knock on the door who have all kinds of needs. Mm-hmm. They need food, they need clothes and toiletry items for small children. They need money so they can pay light bills, gas bills. People need all kinds of needs. So we have to structure ourselves in a way so that when people knock on the door, then we can, to some degree, be prepared to assist them and help to meet that need. So we have a crisis counseling center. So if people need housing, there are people who staff the counseling center who know where homeless can get housing, who know where, if we don't have the food they need, where to direct them. If they need their gas bill paid, or if they're about to lose their house because they haven't paid the note, we have people who know where they can go to get that assistance. So we're there to just try to help people in any way we can.
Mm-hmm. Now, you just finished a 4-year term as the 20th president of the Progressive National Baptist Convention. I think it would be instructive for our audience for you to give us just a history, an overview of the Progressive National Baptist Convention, its genesis, its mission, and then secondly, in that consideration, some of the highlights of your 4 years as president.
All right. The Progressive National Baptist Convention was founded in 1961, and it became the spiritual and denominational home of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and many of the Baptist pastors at that time who supported him in the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. So the distinctive of the Progressive National Baptist is that we wed spirituality with social justice. We focus on the justice themes of the Bible. Mm-hmm. And so historically, of course, with Dr. King and Abernathy, who were members of Progressive, they led the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. Those pastors, Dr. Gardner Taylor, Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, William Augustus Jones, those were the pioneers. Mm-hmm. And so we have that same challenge and responsibility in our time. So during my tenure, what I endeavored to do was to bring social justice, the social justice focus, back as the centerpiece of the convention. Mm-hmm. I always emphasize to our constituents that we can do all of these other things, but if we lose our social justice focus, then we have lost our spiritual DNA. Mm-hmm. So I tried to, in refocusing our efforts on social justice, we addressed the Voting Rights Act, which was dismantled a couple of years ago in 2013, that had been in place. That was the crown jewel of mm-hmm. the civil rights movement. So we have been organizing to try to get the lobby legislators to return the Voting Rights Act, to restore the Voting Rights Act. Supreme Court had stripped it. We focused on SNAP. That's food stamps for mm-hmm. families and individuals who needed food. So, and the Congress had implemented more stringent requirements for persons who were on food stamps, and then took the monies that they took out of the food stamp program and gave them to large corporations to make them even richer. So we addressed those issues. We organized a voting rights, a voter education, and a voter registration campaign so that we can get more people involved in their local communities mm-hmm. in making certain that we elect people to office who would speak to our needs. So those were some of the kinds of things that I endeavored to do while I was the president.
Did the presidency of the convention require a fair amount of travel on your part, I'm sure?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I made it my business. Our headquarters is located in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
So I made it my business to go up there every other month and spend a week so that I could do the necessary administration. We have a full staff, but I tend to be hands-on and wanted to be involved in everything that was going on. So for the administrative part, then I would go every other month so that I could deal with those responsibilities. And then, of course, being in the position, I would get invited to preach special occasion services in our various churches across the country. And then sitting on certain boards representing the convention. So it involved quite a bit of travel.
Now, does the convention have some churches overseas?
Yes, we
international?
Absolutely. We have churches in London, England.
Okay.
We have churches in Ghana. We have churches in Kenya. And we have churches in Nassau, Bahamas. And we have some churches in Cuba. As a matter of fact, the gentleman who succeeded me as president, Dr. Timothy Stewart, is from Nassau in the Bahamas.
So the PNBC came out of the civil rights movement. Came out of is it the National Baptist Convention USA from which the PNBC evolved?
Yes. Dr. King, for a time, was head of the Christian Education Department of the National Baptist Convention. But the president at that time, Dr. J.H. Jackson, did not agree with Dr. King's leading of the civil rights movement. And so he put Dr. King out of the convention. And a number of pastors went with him, and they formed the Progressive Convention so that we could address the social justice, the civil rights issues, but also to provide this denominational and spiritual home for Dr. King and those pastors who supported him.
You've essentially answered this next question, but I just wanted to focus on it for a moment. What sets apart the Progressive Convention apart from the other Black Baptist convention, historical conventions, and other Baptist conventions as far as the larger Baptist family? And apparently what I hear is social justice emphasis.
That's exactly
is that
exactly
in a nutshell?
right. That's it in a nutshell. That's it. We focus, as I previously indicated, on the justice themes of the Bible. And so if we fail to become involved in social justice and addressing social justice issues, then we lose our distinctive. We become like other Baptist groups. And so that is our uniqueness, and that's what makes us who we are. So we train our pastors on how to organize locally, how to address issues in their local communities, as well as state and nationally.
Now, the convention also participates in the North American Baptist Fellowship, Baptist World Alliance.
Absolutely. We're a part of the Christian Council, the National Christian Church, NCC.
Okay.
It's running through my mind.
Council of Churches.
National Council of Churches, yes. We participate in that, but we participate in the National Council of Black Churches. We participate in the Northern Baptist, and we participate in the World Baptist Alliance. So we're a part of the larger community of Baptists, but we're just unique in that we focus on social justice.
There's so much emphasis in Baptist life on that local church autonomy.
Yes.
As a fundamental belief. We sometimes forget that Baptists are a part of a much broader, larger, global community of believers.
That's right.
And very diverse group of believers.
That's right.
Both in terms of theology, worship styles, and certainly in their doctrine.
Right. And we also focus on we're a part of, I should say, the Baptist Joint Committee. And the Baptist Joint Committee, they watch the Supreme Court. They watch what laws are passed that might infringe upon our religious liberty. So that's very important too.
We've alluded to this, but I wanted to delve into it just a little more for our audience, and that is the very unique and important role of the church in the civil rights movement of the post-World War II era into the 60s and 70s.
Right. The African American church was born to address the issue of freedom, just out of slavery. Harriet Tubman, for example, who was the chief engineer of the Underground Railroad, she was a Baptist minister. When the African American church that led the civil rights movement in the 60s, Dr. King was not just a civil rights leader, he was the pastor of a Baptist church. But he saw that the church ought to be addressing the issues of justice, because we believe that all people are created in the image of God, that all of us are the children of God, and as Dr. King said on another occasion, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so when the black church or the African American church fails to address these issues of justice, then it ceases to be the African American church. It's just another church. And we believe that the church doesn't exist just to be self-serving, that it exists to transform society so that we can in fact strive to try to build God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven.
Back in April, we observed and remembered the 50th anniversary of the tragic assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We had a program here. You recommended Dr. Otis Moss Jr., who did a fabulous job, of course, and a sense of history was present with Dr. Moss as one who was there in the thick of the civil rights movement and at Dr. King's side. My point of the question is, these 50 years later, if Dr. King had the opportunity to speak to us, and it's always presumptuous to put words in someone's mouth, but I think you're in a position unique to speak to what he might say to America today.
Well, I think that his words to the church would be similar to his words in the letter from a Birmingham jail, and that is, why is the church silent? When the church is silent on these issues that are impacting the quality of our lives today, there's been a resurgence of racism. And when we are silent, then we are complicit in helping to implement that. And so as God's servants, we have a responsibility to speak out against these as evils. And I think that he would be very disappointed in the fact that racism is still as entrenched as it is. We thought right after the civil rights movement, when he was assassinated in '68, we thought we had made some progress. But here in the last several years, then we see a resurgence of racism. And so we can't take that lying down. We have to stand up and speak out against it and to help to transform the American society.
The church in general, some would say, has lost its edge, has lost its place in American life and American culture. Does that hold true in the African American community? Is the influence of the church still as strong as it has been historically in the black community?
That's a hard question. And on the one hand, I'm tempted to say, yes, it is as strong as it has been. And I say that because no matter what kind of progress we have made, the African American church is still the only institution that black people own and operate. I'm tempted to say, no, it doesn't have that influence because on the other hand, we've been caught up in the culture. That is to say, the negative side of church growth is that that hit American ecclesiastical life in the 70s and 80s and so forth, is that it has tended to cause us to focus on numbers. How many people do we have? Buildings and budgets and people. How many people do we have? And with that emphasis on numbers, we have toned down our prophetic voice because we haven't wanted to make anybody mad. And so in that sense, then no, the church doesn't have the influence that it has had in the past.
Has the prosperity gospel hurt the prophetic edge of the church, the black church?
Absolutely.
But the church in general as well.
And the church in general and African American churches, there's a lot of emphasis on prosperity. Not economic justice, mind you, but individual prosperity. And we think that focus on just prosperity as opposed to the prophetic has caused the church to lose its power and some of its influence.
Dr. Perkins, we're out of time, sir.
Oh, my.
Thank you for your leadership, your prophetic voice in the church today, globally as well as here in the nation. And thank you for your taking time to come to Campbellsville.
It was a delight to be
And we
here.
appreciate you being a part of our dialogue on race process, sir.
My pleasure.
God
Good
bless
to
you.
be with you. And I was just getting warmed up.
Well, we were doing pretty well. We'll have to reschedule to come back. This is John Chowning with Dr. James Perkins, thanking you for watching, once again, Dialogue on Public Issues. Thank you.